This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. All right, we are here with the expert on experts, David C. Baker, author of the amazing book, The Business of Expertise. How are you, sir?
I am good, thank you. Although it is very hot outside and I cannot wait till this weather changes, but I'm doing well.
All righty. Well, let me ask you, so you have this fabulous company that I think, I'm not 100% sure, but Recourses, back like in the 1990s or 2000s, was this about graphic designers or design firms or not?
It was back in the mid-90s. I started this firm to advise design firms and then expanded it to work with all kinds of experts, people who sell their thinking for a living. But yep, that's how it got started.
So it's so funny because I remember seeing the old website, because the old website, you actually had courses, correct? And you had a whole bunch of different sorts of trainings for these creative firms.
I did, yes. Back when I was more patient, I had all those courses. But yeah, that's right. And, you know, we all go through different evolutions. I think I've probably reinvented myself 3 or 4 times over the years, but that's true. You do remember correctly.
Let's go back to the beginning when David C. Baker was just a small boy wearing short pants, or we can go back as far or as near as you would like. But I'm always fascinated by how do people get to do what they're doing today, and what were some of the important pivot points along the path? So take us back as far as you would care to on your business journey, and let's just kind of do that as a springboard for our conversation.
Sounds good. So I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born in the U.S., but I left with my parents when I was very young. So I didn't come back and live in the U.S. permanently until I was 18. During that time, those 14 years or so of my early years, we lived with a tribe of Mayan Indians way up in the highlands of Guatemala. My parents were medical missionaries. Dad did dental work. Mom was a nurse, and they also did literacy work. So I grew up there speaking multiple languages and living basically off the grid. I mean, it didn't feel like it was off the grid, but looking back, it really was. No running water, no electricity, no roads, no stores, that kind of thing. And came to the U.S. when I was 18 and came for school, my first real formal school. Then went to grad school and so on. Started an agency while I was in grad school and did that for 6 years. I'll slow down in just a minute. I'm just kind of skimming over the highlights. But towards the end of that time at the agency, I was working with another consultant, and he was asking me if I would write some articles for his publication. It was called Creative Business, and I was glad to do so. It gave me some exposure and so on. And then I said one day to him, why don't you consult with your subscribers? I think they would appreciate personalized information. He wasn't interested for his own reasons, mainly didn't want to travel, but he said, why don't you do it? So that was 25 years ago, and it started my career as a consultant. So almost overnight, I pivoted from running an agency to advising other agency owners. And then since then, of course, it's ballooned to advising folks who sell their thinking for a living, what I think of as entrepreneurial experts. So I do that from Nashville, where I live. Worked in 30 countries with hundreds and hundreds of firms. And so my life is basically divided into 3 buckets now: an author, a speaker, and an advisor, and they're all kind of tied together. That's a summary of my life.
Really, really cool. Well, let's go back just because I'm kind of geeking out on Recourses 1.0. This was internet marketing way before internet marketing. And this was online education way before online education, even though it might not have been delivered online, but certainly marketed online with list building and a big, beautiful website. And how did you get all of that going all those years ago?
It was one of those situations where necessity was sort of the mother or the father of invention, because here I was paying, I think it was $1,100 or some crazy number per month to basically rent, really. But I was buying a full page ad in a publication. That was my way of stirring up new business. And it was just getting really expensive. And I thought, well, what if I just build a site and I collect people's email addresses and they'll trust me with them in exchange for me sending them regular useful insight. Now we call that content marketing, but back then it wasn't called that. There weren't even any ESPs. This is before the days of Google, of course. So I rented a T1 line, or leased one, for a little bit more than $1,000 a month, and had an email server and a web server and a DNS server in the living room, much to my wife's dismay, obviously. And I just started collecting all of these email addresses and then selling them education, essentially. So I was looking really for a way to save on marketing expenses, thinking, and just stumbled on the idea of content marketing before it was known like that. And since then, I don't know, 38,000 people have signed up to get these regular weekly emails, and then they turn into paid courses that are somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 a day. They're in person. Some of them are online, but most of them are in-person seminars.
Yeah, how about that? That's just really, really interesting because it was totally before all of this became fashionable and trendy and cool. When you said about the magazine, you mentioned about the publication that you had been partnering with. But I also remember back in the day, were you advertising in How magazine?
I was, yes. And I was writing regular articles for them. I actually did a conference with them. I invented the conference and asked if they'd be my partner. It was called Mind Your Own Business, MYOB. And we did that for 10 years together. I did all the programming and they helped promote it and sign all the paperwork at the big facilities so they could take the financial risk. So we'd have 300 to 350 agency principals, design firm principals come every year. And it was just a great experience. It built lifelong friendships with those people, as well as I got to invite all of my competitors to be speakers. And so I built relationships with them as well. So yeah, a long, long road to this. I was a guest on a podcast that was being done in London late last year. The host quoted to me something that Steve Jobs said, and it really struck me. I hadn't heard it before. It was something like, I don't have the words exactly, but it was something like, we can't connect the dots going forward, but we can connect the dots looking back. And I've always thought about how you just have to show up and play all those late night smoky bars, even if not that many people are listening, right? You have to do the work and be faithful that way. And eventually the right opportunities will come your way. I think that's the way that most success happens, right? It doesn't happen just out of the blue. It happens when people just do the hard work and earn the opportunities that come their way.
What a great insight, for sure. So I think what we've learned so far is I've sort of been stalking you your whole career, not necessarily knowing it's you, but it's like, oh yeah, it's the Recourses guy, and it's the Recourses website, and it's this How conference, and this is all amazing, and this is all incredible. It's like, David C. who? Baker?
Yeah.
I don't know this guy. And then, of course, your fantastic book comes out. We'll talk about the book adventure here in a moment. But see, I'm starting to connect the dots now in hindsight.
Right. Yeah, it is crazy, isn't it? And here's one of many, many mistakes I've made. Back when I registered that domain name, Recourses, I could have registered any domain name. I mean, they were all available at the time. I think it was in 94. And I picked such a stupid name that's easy to mispronounce and misspell, and it has no SEO value. It's just crazy, one of those mistakes you make over the years.
Little did we know. So we're having a meta conversation because, of course, I'm talking to an expert about the business of expertise, not only the way you teach and coach and mentor others, but also the way that you're modeling this on your website. The website I'm talking about, of course, is expertise.is, right? Expertise is. Right. And you do some things that I think, given the stage and phase of your career, obviously they make sense. But some other people might be looking at this going, whoa, 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 whoa. He publishes his consulting rates. He publishes his speaking fee, or the fee range.
Right.
Over the years, have you handled that differently? Like, were you, let's have a conversation and then I'll tell you the fees? And then what caused you to externalize the fees, and how has that affected your lead generation or your positioning or any of these other great things that we'll talk about that are in your book?
I'm smiling right now because nobody has ever asked me that question on a podcast. And I think I've been a guest on about 190 of them over the years. So it's, for one thing, it tells me that you actually looked at the site, which is amazing. A lot of hosts don't, but I also think it's great that you asked that question. Yes, it has changed. And I don't know exactly. So I've been doing this for 25 years, and I don't remember exactly when I put the prices up there. I think it was about maybe 3 or 4 years into it. So in the first 3 or 4 years, I didn't have prices, and then I added them. The reason I put them there is not as glorious as you might think, even though the reason they stay there is, I think, pretty glorious. But back then, I had this awful tendency to compromise on my fees all the time. And I felt like if I published them, then I wouldn't face that pressure. I wouldn't even have to think about what I should charge somebody, which is always agonizing. If you need the work, you're going to charge a little bit less. And if you're really busy, you'll charge more. And it's just nonsense, right? So I decided I'm just going to do things differently. I'm just going to publish the fees. Now, there are some other things in there that folks will notice too, and that's that I don't give references, and I explain why in the frequently asked questions. And in every case, every project I do, the fee is 100% fully prepaid and not refundable. The reason for that one is because I found I was just trying to pay attention to myself, what was happening inside as I was advising firms. And what I found was happening is that sometimes when I really felt compelled to have not a mean, but a difficult conversation with a client, I had to deliver some news that I was afraid they may not necessarily take well, or it wasn't what they were expecting or whatever. I found myself backing down just a little bit because I hadn't been completely paid yet. They'd only paid half or, whatever the arrangements were. So I decided that I'm going to have it collected 100% upfront and not refundable. I don't spend that money. It goes in a separate account that I call unearned because I want to have the freedom to give somebody's money back if during the process where I'm getting ready to work with them, I discover some things that if I had known earlier means I would not have agreed to work with them. So I can return the money and it doesn't hurt psychologically. Anyway, I do business a little bit differently. And not just to be different, but because I'm trying to pay attention to what's happening in my head. And I think my clients understand that I'm in their shoes. I also never ask a client to do something that I haven't done myself. So if I say, this is what you should do from a term standpoint, or this is how you should sell yourself, or this is how you should be disciplined with lead generation, I don't ask them to do something that I don't do myself. So it's cleaned up my business life and I don't feel like a fraud in that sense. It's great.
Yeah. Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Well, you've got so many great things in this book. I have no idea how I came across your book, The Business of Expertise, but it's one of these books that I just love. I love the bold, the graphical, and of course it makes perfect sense given your background. But even when you pick up the book, and I recommend every single person listening to this episode, you have to go out and get a copy of David's book. It's amazing, it's incredibly smart, and it's a beautiful book. So this was a self-published book, but we almost shouldn't even say that because this looks better and feels better than almost all the books coming out of every major New York publisher. I tell you what a geek I am. I'm like, look at the weight of this paper. This paper is so glossy. This paper feels so good. This paper is so thick and luscious. Now, it's almost insulting because the book is filled with so many fantastic ideas. But obviously, you believed that to get the attention that you wanted to get with this book, it needed to be graphically attention-getting and even physically feel and look rich. It looks like a rich book, beautiful design, heavy paper, heavy stock, hardback book. You have very clearly on your website the cost breakdown and the whole adventure of writing and publishing this book, and 77% of your expense was in the physical printing of this beautiful masterpiece. How did you decide to invest so heavily in the design and the production of this book, where most authors, especially most self-published authors, they would say, well, it's not that important. This paper, that paper, this cover stock, that cover stock, who cares? Let's get the book out there because the book is filled with great ideas that stand on their own merit. Talk to us about that whole thought process.
I was a little spoiled because I managed a publisher when I was going through grad school for 6 years. And so I kind of learned the ins and outs of publishing and so on. But I'm charging $38 for the book. I mean, you really have to pay that much because it's on discount everywhere. But that's the list price of the book. So you can't do a lousy book for that kind of price. And years ago, it really did matter. You couldn't self-publish a book. That self-publishing a book basically was saying to the marketplace, it's like wearing sweatpants to work. I've just given up. I'm not going anywhere in my life at any point further, so I'm just going to give up. And that was kind of what self-publishing was. Nobody else wanted to publish this book. I'll do it myself. That's not the case anymore. But what is still true is that book cannot look self-published. So for the first print run of 10,000 copies, I spent $52,000. But you make that back with just a couple of speaking engagements or with one consulting engagement. Such a small drop in the bucket compared to what the right book will do for your career. So I don't even think about that expense. I even have the money saved up for the next book. I'm working on the 6th book just because I never want to think about the money side of things. So it just sends the right message. It is self-published, but it's published by a publishing company we own called Rockbench Publishing. And if you go to Amazon, you'll see all those books. It's not an ad for that. I just want to clarify that we published about 38 books or so under that imprint. It's one I'm very proud of. I love the feel of it. That wasn't the original intent. Actually, I was going to write kind of a big, thick textbook thing. And I was sitting down writing. I had done all the research and the outlining, and I was boring myself. I just thought, who in the world is going to really want to read this thing? So decided to make it shorter, smaller, illustrate it, do it in color. And I got emotionally invested in the thing. And I just felt, oh man, I'm just proud of this thing. I've written other books, but I haven't been emotionally proud of them like I am with this one. So it felt good to do.
And I have to congratulate you on the black, white, and red color scheme, of course.
Yeah, right. You'd identified as that. Yeah,
exactly. So there's so many smart things. I don't want to do a book report on this because everyone just needs to go out and read the whole thing cover to cover. And actually, they probably should read it twice because I read it twice. I went to, got to the end, go back to the beginning, read this puppy again because it is so rich. It's like a dense, flourless chocolate cake. So many insights in here. I want to talk to you about one of them, which is you talk about most agencies or most consultancies have 2 doors that a client can enter. They can enter the strategy door and they can enter the done-for-you services door.
Right.
Talk about that model. And even in the book, you have a graphic, you have like a little visual diagram of a house that has 2 doors. And of course, the 2 rooms connect on the inside. But what's the concept first of entering through the strategy door versus the done-for-you services door? And then what's the big danger that a lot of consulting or agency type companies need to be careful with?
Yeah, that's an example of such a simple image that just popped in my mind. And I talked with my New York illustrator and said, hey, can you picture this for me? Because I think it helps to visualize it. So there's one building, there's 2 rooms, there's an outside door to each room, and then a connecting door. And with most firms, what's happening is they have some right fit clients that are hiring them for their thinking up front. Let's do the strategy. Let's get it right. And then you move into that second, which is often a larger room, and you actually do all of the recommendations that you make for the client. You do the implementation. It's the execution room where you do all this stuff for people. And your best clients, you recognize, come in that strategy door first, and then they keep using you to do the other. But you have some clients that don't want to take the time or spend the money to go into the strategy room first. And so they just want to go straight to implementation. They say they've done the strategy and it isn't very good, or they haven't done it, whatever. And it's just not a really fulfilling relationship with the client. And in fact, they're more price sensitive in that second room and so on. So I encourage advisors, experts to think about those 2 rooms. And then the first thing they do is they close off the outside door to the implementation room. So every client that uses them must use them for strategy first. They're not required to go through the connecting door to hire them for implementation or execution work, but they can if they want to. And all of a sudden, that really clarifies the difference of the clients. And as it relates to the primary message of the book, this two-room model helps us see that your positioning is built entirely on the thinking that you do and not the doing that you do for clients, because the doing is largely interchangeable, it's price sensitive, it doesn't scale, it requires a lot of people, which means management, which means investment dollars, and so on. So thinking is very scalable. So it just puts things in the right context and helps people understand what it is they're doing between those two things for clients.
Yeah, and very, very smart. I mean, this is perfect example of strategy versus, hey, can you build us a website? Or
Right.
strategy versus, hey, can you write some copy? And now you've lost all of your expert positioning and they're comparing you to copywriters on Upwork.
Right. It's the difference between content strategy and content creation, right? Content strategy and content marketing. Content marketing without strategy is that second room that's lame and doesn't
Right.
have any price premium with it.
Right. Now, you used one of your magic words. And if I were to say, what is this entire book about? It's about making you and your firm less interchangeable, ideally non interchangeable with any competitor or any alternative. How did this whole concept of the non interchangeable expertise come about? What does it mean? How do we know when we have it? How do we know when we don't have it? Talk about that brilliant central concept of yours.
Well, it starts by just trying to solve the problem that a lot of business folks are solving, and that's the problem of staying busy. And most folks never get beyond that. They just try to solve their positioning and their lead generation problem to solve that one thing. How do I stay busy so that I don't have people sitting around and not earning money? The notion of being less interchangeable is built on the idea that it's more than about staying busy, it's about charging a price premium for your work. So there are all kinds of people who do something similar to what you do. Now, it may not seem that way to you, but to your prospects, they have a difficult time seeing those differences. So, what you're trying to do is to create a positioning that is so different from your competitors that it would justify a charging them a price premium. And that's where all of this is built. And then the book goes into a lot of detail about exactly how to make those decisions. Like if you're too tightly positioned, you have no competitors, not enough competitors. If you're too widely positioned, you have too many competitors. So it adds some numbers to that discussion as well.
Whoa, what a great interview. Are you taking notes? Remember to visit thespeakingshow.com for complete show notes, links, downloads, and resources related to this episode. See you over there. Now, I know you have some beautiful words in here for your podcast co-host Blair Enns, and you have a great podcast yourself, which is The Two Bobs. How did you and Blair initially connect? And then tell me a little bit about your very close collaboration on some aspects of your work together.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating story. Blair is a friend, he's a collaborator, and he's also a competitor. And we can kind of make those three things live together. Actually, I met him because I was putting on that MYOB conference we mentioned a minute ago, and I invited him to come speak. And it introduced him. He was a very well known in the Canadian market, in Australia, in London, and this really kicked off things in the US for him, only just because he's so smart and such a good speaker. So he came to speak at that thing, and then we found some other ways to collaborate. We did a new business summit, we called it, every year for 10 years. And then he came to me and said, hey, let's do a podcast together. I was glad to do it because I enjoy spending time with him, but I didn't honestly think it would amount to much. But we did it, and it's actually the number one podcast in the space. Now, there are a lot of podcasts that are much bigger than ours that people in the space listen to, but it's number one podcast directed at the space. So it's been fantastic. We've only done 68, I think, episodes. It comes out every 2 weeks, and we have a great time. It's just we don't have any guests. We pick a topic, and I interview him, then he interviews me, and we just pick something that will be really relevant to principles of entrepreneurial creative firms.
And of course, everyone's wondering why the podcast is called Two Bobs.
Oh, because of Office Space. Most people have probably seen that really underground classic movie. And the two consultants in there are Bobs. And so we get that thrown in our faces all the time. So we thought we'd just embrace it and have some fun.
and thus the red stapler.
Right. Yeah.
Thus the red
Milton in the basement, right? Milton
Right,
in the basement.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. Who hasn't done
Now,
his TPS reports?
no, not yet. Not yet. But he's going to have to go ahead and stay here all weekend just to make those happen. Thanks a lot.
Oh, that
Cult
phrase.
classic. Total
Yeah.
cult classic.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned something in passing that I think I want to go back to, which is Rockbench Publishing, that in all your spare time, when you're not keynoting and speaking and consulting and advising, we also run this publishing company that has 38 books in the catalog. How did you start that? How do how do people submit? How do people get considered to work with you? Is it sort of an entrepreneurial hybrid publishing model? Tell us about Rockbench.
It is a hybrid model. It was started in 2007. At the time, it was the first out there. A lot of hybrid publishers have now appeared, and so it's not as unique or as important in the marketplace as it used to be. So we kind of decided earlier this year to wind down the publishing of physical books, except for my own. And we're now just publishing ebooks and audiobooks for authors. But it's a very unique model in that it returns about 4 to 5 times the royalty rate to authors, but they also have to pay for the manufacturing costs. So in that sense, it's a hybrid publisher like Page Two or Evergreen out of Austin and so on.
Right, exactly. Very, very cool. And those 38 books, are they in all different topic categories, or are they all sort of in the marketing and professional services world?
The criteria we use to decide if a book gets published is it about thought leadership insight? So is it somebody who's selling their thinking for a living? 3 of the books are used as textbooks at universities. Blair's 2 books, I published those as well. Those are part of that count. And they're not all in marketing, but they're all selling their thinking for a living.
Interesting. Wow. Very, very nice. And now you mentioned that you've set aside a little bit of a war chest for the next book. Can we get a sneak peek into what that next book might be?
Sure. I don't have the title yet, but it's something about the tradecraft of the advisor's tradecraft. So it's about how to actually do advising in a way that's effective for your clients. You can have a long life doing it. It's sustainable for you as an advisor. I've never seen a book quite like that, so I'm having to spend a lot of time researching it and outlining it, and I've started writing it. It should be out early next year.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, it's funny, and I'm so glad that you're writing this book, because in looking at the way that you describe your advisory services, you're very clear with the pricing, you're very clear with the process, you're very clear with the timing, you're very clear that, by the way, this is not a coaching relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's an advising relationship, and there's links and there's resources and there's downloads that help people really understand not only how you work, but your personality. And by the time someone's done reading that, it's like they're hiring their friendly Uncle David.
Yeah, or Simon Cowell, as sometimes people say.
Either way, but you're not this objective, canned, you infuse your personality with certainly the way that you market and talk about your services. And it sounds like what this book is about is how to infuse that into the delivery of your services also.
Yes, that's right. I do feel like, especially if somebody's going to be paying a lot of money to an advisor, I just feel like they deserve that sort of transparency. I know the kinds of questions that I get regularly. So every time I start getting the same question over and over again, I try to build it into the frequently asked question.
Right.
I also want to be efficient. I want a prospect to be able to self-select themselves in or out of the process without me having to get involved. In many cases, I have one conversation with a prospect and then they either sign up or they don't. In some cases, I've never spoken with the prospect. It's all by email and I just show up off the plane. So it just makes it more efficient, which I think is something that you're looking for as a consultant. Otherwise, that's part of what it means to make it sustainable for you.
And I'll tell you another thing, and I want to ask you about this, but I'll tell you first, that another thing that impressed me quite a lot is you go into great detail to describe your ideal client.
Mm-hmm.
Who they are, their behavior, what they're willing to let you do, what they're not willing to let you do. They pay their bill on time. They see the value of the fee instantly compared to the return on investment. They pay you without reminder. They pay you promptly and without reminder. That's another level of bravery, kind of like publishing the fee schedule. When did you have the insight to say, I'm just going to put this out there because this is who I do my best work with anyway. They might as well know about it.
You have put your finger on something that is very different about who I am. And it stems from the fact, I don't know for sure here, but I think it stems from the fact that what I do for a living is one of several choices. I happen to land on this career and I really enjoy it. I think I'm good at it, but it's not the only thing I could do. And if it doesn't work, I don't really care. I'll just go do something else. So I'm not going to work too hard to make this work. I'm simply going to believe in some things, have some very clear principles. And if the marketplace agrees with me, they'll send their work to me and they'll pay me and it'll work out fine. If I make the wrong choices, the marketplace will tell me that and I'll just go find something else to do. I'm not willing to make constant sacrifices for my clients. I'm here to help them do something very specific, and I know how I like to work. I'm not going to be grumpy about it. I'm just going to be very specific about it. And if it works for them, fine. And if it doesn't, fine. There are, a couple 100,000 possible clients for me, and I only need 30 or 40 a year. So far, there have been enough victims that buy this stuff, so it works out.
That's totally great. Well, let me ask you, and we could talk for hours, but we're going to wrap it up here in a couple of minutes. Would you advise a much younger, much hungrier consultancy to put these kinds of structures and these kinds of filters and criteria in place, even when they quote unquote do need the work and they do need the money? But this posture is a very powerful posture that I don't need the work. I can walk away. Here are the conditions of doing business with us, and we will be of amazing, incredible service to you. But this is what we need you to step up with. Would you advise a firm who's not as well established as you to adopt that before they're even perhaps ready to, or perhaps when they're still scared to?
Yes, absolutely. And to make that work, because there will be a significant length of time when there's not going to be enough work for them, to make that work, they'll need to have saved up enough money so that they don't starve during the process of building up their business, or they will need to have a second job while this builds up. Because financial pressure is what makes people desperate, and desperate people make stupid decisions. So you have these desperate business owners who need to make payroll or whatever it is, they need to pay a vendor. And that's when they begin compromising on their business principles. And I think you ought to have those business principles and you ought to stick with them all the time. Even if that means during the beginning year or two, you have a second shift job or something to make this work. And even worse than that, even if it means you go out of business. We say we believe certain things, but then we don't really believe them when things get tough. So I do believe that it's really healthy. And I've talked many of my clients into doing the same thing. They have a section on their website that says, this is the minimum fee. These are the kinds of clients we work exceptionally well with. Here's the process we follow. And it helps the firm feel more confidence because they've defined very clearly where their expertise is. So yeah, I do believe in it.
Yeah, very, very powerful. Well, David, let me ask you two final questions. Our final question will be, how do people get connected and stay connected to more David C. Baker? Before we even get there, though, if folks were to take one central concept from our conversation today about the business of expertise, what would you hope that would be? What would you love to have stick in their brain?
I think it's to make a very careful, very considered and bold positioning decision about what is a great fit for them. Positioning is really painful because you're essentially saying, no, I won't do this kind of work, but I will do this. And I'm really excited about this. So that would be it, to make a very courageous positioning decision about who you're not going to work with. And that'll clarify who you will work with.
Totally fantastic. Well, how do people get connected and stay connected if they want more David C. Baker in their lives, in their inbox, and in their brain? What should they do?
Well, if they want to know more about the book, they can go to expertise.is, a website you already sent them to. And then where I do my work outside of writing is at davidcbaker.com. It's free to sign up for the weekly emails, and I never bother people. They can sit and get those emails for decades, and I'll still be generating them. So that'd be the best way to do it.
Fantastic. Well, sir, it's been a genuine pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.